Hi, I'm John Feldt. This is the weekly water outlook for Texas and the southern region, recorded on February 3rd, 2012. Well, off to our east, it was pretty active last week. A lot of severe weather, mainly from Louisiana, Arkansas, Missouri eastward. But you can see some of these streaks that extend through eastern and central Oklahoma and parts of northeast Texas. Take a look at these streaks right here. If you look at these right here, these are individual thunderstorm elements right here. And if I looked at that and I wouldn't know what month it is, I would think it would be spring. That's typical what you would see in spring. Normally in winter, it's more synoptic type precipitation or widespread uniform precipitation. On the bottom smaller images, those are severe weather reports. You can see that the blue would be wind events like a severe thunderstorm, and red are tornadoes. So very widespread with scattering of reports in Oklahoma. A bit of flooding here and there, very localized in parts of Texas. And some wind events over the eastern part of Texas and more widespread over northern Louisiana and a large part of Arkansas into Missouri. So it was pretty busy over a small area of the Gulf and the South region. The most significant rain occurred over Oklahoma and Arkansas. You can see the blue there. That's about an inch or two of precipitation. Now, if I look at the precipitation over the percent of normal for the last week, because the rain really didn't get going all that much in Texas, you can see for the most part the state was very dry with 25% of precipitation that would be normal over the week. And then as we get into those heavier thunderstorms in Oklahoma, the central and east, mainly the northeast part of the state, you can see above normal precipitation. You can really see those streaks very clearly now. The individual thunderstorm elements were moving southwest to northeast, and the line was moving west to east. More scattered in Arkansas, the eastern part of the Arkansas, with some areas of above and below normal. I also put on this image the areas of flooding. Those are those squares, and you can see that for the most part, the flooding is off to the east of our region, fairly quiet as far as a river standpoint over Texas in the south. Now, there was a bit of snow in the colder air last week over the far northwest part of the state of Texas. Fairly widespread snow over Kansas. The purple dots are lighter amounts of snow, 1 to 3 inches. Then we get into a band of a little bit heavier snow, that orange color over the northeast part of Kansas, and that was 4-inch snow or more. So Kansas did get quite a bit of snow, but elsewhere very scattered. I did want to take a picture, the bigger picture here. You can see some of it is melted. There's just a tad on the ground over the far northeast part of Kansas as of this briefing. Otherwise, there's no snow on the ground over the south. The snow cover analysis, the graph on the bottom image there, shows the progression of snow cover across the nation. It started off very high, about 65% starting in 2013, and now it's sort of holding steady between 40 and 45%. Water equivalents are something that I keep an eye on over the northern plains, and just sort of shows you the water content of the snow for the potential, when that melts in spring, the potential for flooding. Okay, so by now you know that the Arctic Oscillation is one of my favorite teleconnections for precipitation patterns. We've gone through about 4 transitions so far this winter. Number 1 and number 3 were negative phased oscillations. Matter of fact, we've been in a negative phase for about 90% of the winter. If you've read my newsletter, I mentioned that. And then if you look at 2 and 4, those are positive phases. And 2 is really just sort of a neutral phase. So we're really in the most positive phase Arctic Oscillation. And during a positive phase Arctic Oscillation, the Arctic vortex of very cold air is strong, and it keeps that cold air confined well to the north. We tend to get more of a west to east zonal type flow, more relaxed flow, not as much north and south. So we're sort of peaking this week on that positive, and then it looks like it's going to be, at least the forecast red there shows a very rapid drop again. And so from a forecast perspective, I think what we're looking at here to keep in mind is starting off in a positive AO regime, and then perhaps towards the end of the forecast period going back towards a negative. Now, there's another oscillation I keep an eye on. I don't always mention it because it's not always impacting the weather. This is the MJO, Madden-Julian Oscillation. And pretty complicated graph here. I'll probably explain that every time I show it. This is the plot of the MJO, and the MJO is a traveling type oscillation. It doesn't stay in one place. So it's moving around the globe. And what we have are 8 different regions. And when it gets into this region 6 or 7, that's when it gets into the Pacific Ocean, and it does have the possibility of influencing our weather. Matter of fact, we've had 2 times this winter I think it could have interacted with some of the heavier precipitation. Definitely the first one earlier this winter, and perhaps even earlier this week where we had the severe weather. Now look at the flow. This is a moisture channel. Look where the flow originated from. Pacific Ocean, and that brought some of the moisture into Texas and Oklahoma and then eastward. So could it be tapping some of that enhanced convection in the Pacific? Possibly. Definitely, I think the first one we had earlier this season. But right now, it looks like the MJO has entered the 8 and then into 1 here, and that's not so much influencing our weather. Now, I noticed that the Climate Prediction Center does say that the MJO would also favor an active southerly jet during the period, and that's where mainly to the east of our region there could be enhanced precipitation that I will be talking about. I thought I'd step back just for a moment here and look at the big picture, going back 30 days and sort of the precipitation patterns. And I think if I put a normal precipitation over this, you would see from a seasonal perspective, you do have that very strong gradient from west to east, and that's what you're seeing here with heavier precipitation over the central and eastern parts of Texas, and then really beginning to increase as you get into Arkansas and Louisiana on eastward. And I put the areas in flood, and you can see that's really been the hot spot right now from Louisiana, Mississippi, parts of Alabama into the Tennessee and Ohio River valleys, and much quieter further to the north over the central part of the U.S. that's still in a very significant drought. I also look at vulnerabilities a lot. This would be indicative of potential for flooding or significant runoff. And areas of red are generally drier zones, and areas of blue are wetter zones. And you can see most of the Gulf into the southern region from Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas, most of it is that red, and that's saying that the soils can hold quite a bit of rain and can use that rain, but there are some pockets of vulnerability as well, and those are those areas of blue over the eastern part of Texas, eastern part of Oklahoma, and the majority of Arkansas and Louisiana. So right now we really have 2 different types of vulnerabilities. We have a dry vulnerability over the eastern parts of our region, and we have a potentially wet vulnerability over the far eastern parts of the region. Now I want to talk about the jet stream, do a jet stream analysis this week because it's going to be indicative of that positive oscillation and what that might bring our region. Well, here is the jet stream as of Sunday. Now what I'm showing you here is the jet stream as well as areas of mid and upper level moisture. So this is going to give some idea of the energy in the atmosphere and also the potential for precipitation. So as we start out the week, you can see that we have a digging area of low pressure, or trough of low pressure in the east. And then as we get through the middle of the week, this is getting towards the middle of the week, what I want to point out here is this area of green is indicative of that mid and upper level moisture that's streaming across the central and the eastern part of this nation. That's going to be the primary precipitation feature this week. I also want to point out here that if you look at the jet stream here, you see that by the middle of the week, it sort of straightens out. It's much more of a west to east flow than at the beginning of the week, and that's showing that that positive Arctic oscillation is really settling in through this week. The southern jet stream is a little bit more active, and we have the flow, like I said, from west to east. Now, if we go through the week, the area of green here, you can see that very quickly moves through, and that's our chance of rain over the middle part of the nation and the southeast U.S. Some more lighter or moderate snow over the northern tier, and that's that pattern we've seen for quite some time now. So if I go out a little bit further towards the 5th of February, and then as I near late this week, What we see here is, again, a very strong west to east flow, a very strong progressive flow. This is going to keep moisture moving very quickly, lighter amounts of precipitation. And after that midweek system, it looks fairly quiet for the rest of the week until we get close to next weekend. Now, next weekend, I want to point out we have a stronger part of the southern jet developing. Here it is right here over the western U.S. And you can see it moves across the area over the weekend, and it brings, this is that chance of heavier rain from the Gulf Coast states up through parts of the southeast U.S., the Tennessee and Ohio River valleys. That's going to be a stronger system, and that'll be next weekend. Now, if I go out just a little bit further here towards the end of the mile run, you begin to see the jet stream beginning to bow from the north to the south, and that's the possible indication of another change from a positive Arctic oscillation back to a negative Arctic oscillation. So here's the rainfall forecast this week. It looks like during the week there's one pretty modest type rain event, maybe a ½ inch to an inch on the high side. It looks like it's going to be very typical in the pattern we've seen, where it's going to be brushing the eastern part of Oklahoma, the eastern third of Texas, most of Arkansas, most of Louisiana, and then to our areas to the east. There is the possibility next weekend of another event coming through. I'll be updating that on our midweek briefing. Again, that looks like it's going to be a very similar type pattern to what we see in this midweek type pattern. I did want to show the 8 to 14 day, and it does show that that active track Louisiana into the Ohio Valley is likely to continue. And over the south, it looks like it's much more quieter type pattern. I think if you sort of draw a line right in here, actually it goes back in here, this whole area right in here looks pretty quiet as we get into the middle and perhaps even the latter part of the month. So the takeaway points for this week's briefing: chance of some rain this week, mainly towards the middle part of the week over the eastern sections.